Now that we have the database configured, the Git repository set up, and our application created, it's time to work on actually making things happen. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to tell Sails that we want a new object. And to do that, we're going to create a customer object. And to create the customer object, we're going to open up a terminal. And down below here, right here in WebStorm, we have a terminal. And that terminal already opens in our applications directory. And we're going to tell Sails to generate a new object called customer. And to do that, we're going to type Sails generate API customer. And hit return, and bada bing, bada boom, Sails has created a new API. So what is that API? If we look here in controllers and in models, Sails has automatically created two new files for us, customer.js in models and customercontroller.js under controllers. So before we get too far, let's just commit this new change. So open up GitHub, navigate to your changes, and see, look, we have a new file here, customer controller, and a new file, customer. Create customer model. Done. Commit. We won't sync yet. We'll sync when we're done at the end. So what goes in each of these files? Sails follows the model view controller model, where the models file is going to contain information about the model, the data that you want to store. So we're going to store a couple little bits of information. I'm just going to create a skeleton here. It doesn't have everything that you need, but it'll be a good start. So we're going to create an attribute of type string. Makes sense. Name is going to be a string, and you could split that up into first name and last name if you want. And we're going to set this as required. So Sails, if you look on their documentation page, Sails has a few bits of validation that it can provide. One of those is that some bit of information is required. That means without including that bit of information, Sails will error out and will not try to insert that record into the database. So that provides an extra layer of validation in addition to whatever you might put on the database. So we're going to set that as required, and then we're going to add another attribute called email. And we're going to say that is also a type string. And Sails, again, within that waterline framework, has a whole bunch of different data types that it can have. It'll have string, you can have text for longer bits of text. Something like a blog post you'd want to store in a text rather than a string. You can also have integers, floats, dates, date time, Boolean, binary, array, and JSON. And Sails can store each of those types of objects and then interfaces with the database to create the appropriate table fields to store those. So we're going to say email type string, and another bit of validation is email. And if I force that email validation, what that tells Sails to do is guarantee that I have something that looks like an email address in that email field. And then the last thing, I'll add one more, don't forget your commas. I will add one more field here called state. And that's going to be another string. Just leave it at that. So we have three attributes in our customer model. We have name, email, and state. And those are all created now. We're just going to hit Control S to save that file, and now we can run. And that will open up that application server, Sails. And if we navigate to localhost 1337, note we have not changed anything about the home page. We'll cover that in a different video about the home page routing. But now we can go to customer. And if you'll note here, we don't have anything in that customer table of the database because we haven't added any customers. But what Sails does provide, if we open up WebStorm again and look in the config directory at blueprints.js, and blueprints are default routes and default actions that Node and Sails provide for you to be able to take shortcuts and not have to manually specify everything, every route, and every action that you have. So if we look down here, shortcuts is true. That's commented out, but it says shortcuts are enabled by default, but should be disabled in production. Shortcut routes are helpers that give you access to create, read, update, and delete from the browser's URL bar. So automatically, as soon as we create this application, and as soon as we created that customer model, we have the ability to edit and create customers. So we are going to go to customer/create and then add a parameter using the question mark called name. And I'm going to put my name in here. And then I'm going to add another parameter for email equals ryan@email.com. And you'll notice as soon as I hit return there, I can see that it's returned a JSON object with name, Ryan, email, that email address that I entered, an ID, and then created at and updated at, and those are automatically added. So now if I go back to that customer, it's returned here that opening bracket, which means this is an array, followed by that object. And now if I create a second customer, name equals Baba Joe, and email equals hill@billy.com. That returns, again, that JSON object with name and email. Notice I don't have city there. I could have added city as an attribute to the model, but because city's not required, I'm just going to leave that out for now. And then if we delete all that and go back to that customer page, now we have a customer with the name Ryan Schetzler, with an email ryan@email.com, and a customer with the name Baba Joe with an email hill@billy.com. And notice that state in both cases is null because that's a field in the database that's not being created. If you're curious, you can open up MySQL Workbench. I've left it open here from the last video, but if you open up MySQL Workbench, you can open up your Node financial table and look at customer. And look, it's created that table customer for us, and it's created the columns name, email, state, ID, created, and updated. So all of that information, all of those are being stored in the database. And if we right click on here and click select rows, limit 1,000, just one of the default queries that it has, you'll notice those two records are created here in our MySQL database. All of that was handled by Sails and that waterline database layer. So now you have everything that you need to create an object in Sails that is interactive with the database. Next, we'll talk about how to modify the way that is interacted with at the controller level to create a form that you can use to add a new customer. And of course, now that we've got that model created, we don't want to forget to check it into GitHub. So we can go back here and look at the changes that are made. We've got customer.js, that model that we've added. Look, it looks like it's added some strange line to layout.ejs here. I might have had a typo there. So if I see changes that I don't want to keep, I can right click on those and discard changes. But I do want to keep the customer.js changes. So we're going to say add customer model and commit to master. Those have now been committed. And so now we will sync that up to GitHub.